Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. Alright, let's talk about one of the biggest mysteries in Warhammer 40k, the return of the Emperor of Mankind. This isn't just some wild fan theory, it's a question that has haunted the Imperium for over 10,000 years. Will the Emperor rise again? If so, how? Or maybe, just maybe, he's already returning, just not in the way we expect. Right now, the Emperor sits motionless on the golden throne. His body is broken, barely held together by ancient mechanisms, but his mind? His mind still stretches across the galaxy, guiding, protecting, and perhaps waiting. The Emperor of Mankind has been entombed on the golden throne for over 10,000 years, but to say that he is simply alive would be an oversimplification. His body is barely functional, a decaying husk sustained by arcane machinery and the daily sacrifice of 1,000 psychers. Yet despite this, he remains the single most important force keeping the Imperium together. Without him, it would crumble into darkness, swallowed by the warp and torn apart by enemies on all sides. The Golden Throne is more than just a life support system. It is a prison, a fortress, and a conduit of power unlike anything else in the galaxy. The Emperor's mind, though cut off from his physical form, still reaches across the stars, guiding his people in ways they don't fully understand. Some say he speaks through the Emperor's tarot, offering cryptic glimpses of the future to those who know how to interpret them. Others believe he subtly influences events, nudging humanity away from annihilation in ways too complex for mere mortals to comprehend. And then there's the Astronomicon, the great psychic beacon that allows Imperial ships to navigate the warp. Without it, interstellar travel would become nearly impossible, leaving the Imperium fractured and helpless. The Emperor doesn't just power the Astronomicon, he asterisk the Astronomicon. His mind fuels its radiance, allowing humanity to maintain a tenuous grip on the stars. This alone proves that, even in his shattered state, he is far from powerless. But what does it mean to live when you're nothing more than a mind holding an empire together through sheer willpower? Some argue that the Emperor is already dead in every meaningful way. His body no longer functions, his voice no longer commands, and his dreams of a rational, enlightened Imperium have been twisted into a theocratic nightmare. The very thing he fought against, superstition and blind faith, now define his empire. If the Emperor of the Great Crusade could see what the Imperium has become, would he even recognize it? Of course, there's another possibility, that the Emperor is evolving into something else entirely. Many believe he is no longer just a man, or even a perpetual, but a true god, his consciousness growing beyond mortal limits. The faith of trillions has given him power, reshaping his essence within the warp. If the Chaos Gods can thrive on the belief of their followers, why not the Emperor? Perhaps the Golden Throne is not a tomb, but a cocoon. Perhaps the being that emerges from it will be something entirely new. Theories about his current state range from the hopeful to the horrifying. Some believe he is slowly healing, using the psychic energy of the sacrifices to restore himself. Others suggest that he has already left his body behind and now exists purely as a warp entity, influencing reality in ways we can't yet perceive. And then there's the darker theory, the idea that he is trapped, unable to die, unable to act, forced to watch as his Imperium stagnates and decays. If that's true, then the greatest hero of mankind is also its most tragic prisoner. One of the biggest questions is whether the Emperor is even aware in the way we understand. Some psychers claim to have heard his voice in their dreams, while others have had visions of a golden figure battling against the darkness in the warp. But these could just as easily be the desperate illusions of a dying empire as genuine messages from the master of mankind. If he is conscious, then what is he thinking? Is he proud of what his Imperium has become, or is he filled with regret? Is he waiting for something or someone to set him free? The Imperium survives because the Emperor endures. Whether he is a god, a prisoner, or something beyond comprehension, his presence alone holds back the tide of destruction. But for how long? And if he does return, will humanity even be ready for what comes next? Is the Emperor of mankind truly alive? That question has haunted the Imperium for over 10,000 years, and depending on who you ask, the answer can range from absolute certainty to complete despair. Officially, the Adeptus Terra insists that the Emperor endures, watching over humanity from the Golden Throne, guiding and protecting his people as he always has. To the Ecclesiarchy, he is not just alive. He has ascended, becoming a true god, far beyond mortal limitations. But among those who dig deeper, among the scholars, rogue psychers, and even some members of the Inquisition, doubts creep in. What does alive even mean for someone in his state? And if he is still there, is he truly the Emperor humanity once knew, or has he become something else? The strongest argument for his continued existence is the Astronomicon. Every day, thousands of psychers are sacrificed to keep its light burning, and so far, it still shines. That alone suggests that the Emperor's mind, or at least some aspect of it, is still functioning. If he were completely gone, the Imperium would have collapsed into chaos long ago. But this doesn't necessarily mean he is alive in the way we understand. The Golden Throne was designed to maintain him in a state of perpetual stasis, preventing both death and true consciousness. What if he is nothing more than an echo, a lingering presence sustained by blind faith and ritual sacrifice? Many within the Imperium believe that the Emperor is in a deep slumber, recovering from his wounds. The theory goes that the sacrifices are not just maintaining the Astronomicon, but feeding his regeneration. Some even claim that the reason the High Lords of Terra refuse to tamper with the Golden Throne, despite knowing that it is failing, is because they fear waking him too soon. If he is healing, then what happens when he finally awakens? Will he rise as the same Emperor who led the Great Crusade, or will millennia of suffering and isolation have changed him into something unrecognizable? Then there are the darker theories. Some whisper that the Emperor has already died, that the Imperium is clinging to a lie because the truth would shatter everything. They argue that the Astronomicon isn't powered by him at all, but by the constant flood of psychers being fed into the throne, and that the Emperor's body is nothing more than a rotting corpse on a failing machine. If that's true, then the Imperium has been running on borrowed time for centuries, blindly marching toward a final catastrophe. Other theories take an even stranger turn. Some believe that the Emperor has already transcended his physical form, leaving his decaying body behind and fully entering the warp. If the Chaos Gods exist as manifestations of raw belief, could the Emperor not become something similar? Billions worship him as a god. What if that faith has reshaped him into one? Some fanatics claim he has already begun appearing to his followers in visions, not as a frail corpse, but as a being of golden light, rallying humanity for a final war against chaos. If this is true, then his death was not an ending, but the beginning of something far greater. And then there's the possibility that he is still alive, but in unimaginable torment, trapped in his decaying body, unable to speak or act, forced to watch as his Imperium twists into something he never wanted. A prisoner within his own mind, desperately trying to reach out, only to be drowned out by the dogma of those who claim to speak in his name. If this is the truth, then the Emperor is not just the Imperium's ruler. He is its greatest victim. So is he alive? Dead? A god? A prisoner? No one knows for certain, and perhaps no one ever will. But one thing is undeniable. The Imperium cannot survive without him. Whether he wakes, dies, or evolves into something beyond human comprehension, his fate will decide the future of mankind. The only question is, when that moment comes, will humanity be ready for what happens next? The Imperium is built on faith, But faith alone isn't enough when the galaxy is drowning in war and uncertainty. People need signs, glimpses of what's to come, anything that reassures them that the Emperor is still watching over them. And for those desperate enough to seek his will, there is the Emperor's Tarot, a deck of psychically reactive cards said to provide visions of the future, offering guidance to those who know how to interpret them. Some believe it is the last true link to the Emperor himself, a way for him to speak across the void of time and space. Others argue that it's just another tool, no different from the prophecies and omens of countless other mystics. But what if the tarot holds the key to understanding when, or if, the Emperor will return? The Emperor's Tarot isn't just a game of chance. It's a powerful divination tool that only the most skilled psychers can use without risking insanity or worse. Each deck is unique, handcrafted, and imbued with psychic energy. When drawn by a trained user, the cards don't just reveal random images. They shift asterisk, reshaping themselves based on the energies of the warp, the fate of the user, and perhaps even the will of the Emperor himself. Some say that the most powerful readings can show events years, even centuries in advance, though rarely with complete clarity. Like all things tied to the warp, the future is fluid, constantly in motion. But here's where things get interesting. Over the centuries, there have been whispers of readings that predict something massive, a great upheaval, a moment when the Emperor's fate will change forever. Some see it as a sign of his return, a prophecy hidden in the cards, waiting to be uncovered. Certain patterns, when drawn together, supposedly indicate renewal, resurrection, or even ascension. Others, however, interpret these same signs as a warning that the Emperor is reaching the limits of his endurance, and that soon something, whether it be his death, his rebirth, or something far worse, will come to pass. One of the most well-known prophecies linked to the Tarot speaks of the Golden Rebirth, a future where the Emperor rises anew to lead humanity into a new age. The reading is said to appear only in the hands of the most powerful psychers, and always with the same key cards: the Throne, the Storm, and the Phoenix. The Throne represents the Emperor's current state. The Storm symbolizes the chaos that threatens the Imperium, and the Phoenix, well, that one's obvious. But not all interpretations are so hopeful. Some argue that the Phoenix doesn't mean rebirth, but destruction, the end of the Emperor as he is now, paving the way for something else entirely. And if that's the case, then what exactly is coming? Skeptics, of course, dismiss all of this as nonsense. They argue that the tarot is nothing more than a reflection of the user's own subconscious, a glorified tool for reading the energies of the warp rather than any true connection to the Emperor. After all, if the Emperor could communicate so clearly, why would his messages be so cryptic? Why allow his followers to interpret his will through symbols instead of simply speaking to them directly? It's a fair point, but at the same time, the warp doesn't follow the rules of the material world. If the Emperor truly exists within it in some form, then maybe this is the only way he can reach out. And then there are the stories of readings gone horribly wrong, visions so powerful and so terrifying that they leave the reader broken, their minds shattered by glimpses of something beyond mortal comprehension. Some psychers have drawn the cards only to drop dead on the spot, their souls seemingly burned out by whatever they saw. Others have gone mad, raving about a golden figure battling a tide of darkness, a final war that will either save humanity or doom it forever. Could these be warnings, messages, or just more tricks of the warp, feeding on the desperation of those who seek answers? Regardless of whether the tarot is truly a window into the Emperor's will or just another tool warped by belief, one thing is clear: something is coming. The Imperium stands on the edge of its greatest crisis since the Horus Heresy, and the signs are everywhere. Whether the Emperor will return, evolve, or finally fall, the Tarot may hold the answers. The real question is whether anyone is truly ready to understand them. The myth of the Star Child is one of the most fascinating and controversial theories about the Emperor's possible return. It's not an official doctrine of the Imperium. Far from it. In fact, the Inquisition actively hunts down those who spread it, branding them heretics. But despite the dangers, whispers of the Star Child persist, passed between rogue psychers, radical scholars, and those who believe the Emperor's future lies not in the decaying husk on the Golden Throne, but in something entirely new. The core idea is that the Emperor's soul didn't simply remain trapped in his body after the Horus heresy. Instead, part of it, maybe even the most essential part, was released into the warp, where it exists as a nascent entity waiting to be reborn. Just as the Emperor himself was the reincarnation of ancient human shamans who sacrificed themselves to create a single, immortal being, this theory suggests that his death at Horus's hands wasn't an ending, but the beginning of a new cycle. The Star Child, as believers call it, is the embryonic form of the Emperor's next incarnation, slowly gaining power in the warp until the moment of its return. If this is true, then what remains on the Golden Throne is nothing more than a fragment of the Emperor's former self, powerful, yes, but incomplete. Some theorists argue that this explains why the Imperium has become so stagnant, so devoid of progress and vision. Without the full essence of the Emperor to guide it, the Imperium has become a machine running on inertia, maintained by faith but lacking true direction. The Star Child, they claim, is the missing piece, and when it returns, it will bring with it a new age for humanity, perhaps even the enlightenment the Emperor once dreamed of. Of course, not everyone sees this as a hopeful prospect. If the Emperor is truly divided, then what does that mean for his ultimate fate? Could the Star Child and the being on the Golden Throne be in conflict? Could his rebirth mean the destruction of the current Imperium? Some fear that if the Star Child emerges, it will shatter the Emperor's presence in the material world, cutting off the Astronomicon and plunging the Imperium into darkness. Others worry that whatever returns might not be the Emperor at all, but something new, something different. If faith and belief shape beings in the warp, then what happens when an entire galaxy's worth of devotion reshapes the soul of a man who once denied his own divinity? Another aspect of the Star Child myth is the idea of the Sensei, a secretive group said to be the Emperor's direct descendants. Unlike the Astartes, who were created from his genetic material but are still mortal, the Sensei are supposedly true immortals, scattered across the galaxy, unaware of their own divine heritage. Some believe that these individuals will play a key role in the Emperor's rebirth, that when the time comes, they will be drawn together, sacrificed, or perhaps merged into the Star Child to bring about his return. Others see them as potential usurpers, claiming the Emperor's power for themselves and leading humanity down an unpredictable path. The Imperium, of course, rejects all of this outright. The Inquisition considers the Star Child myth to be the work of chaos, a dangerous lie meant to weaken faith in the Emperor as he exists now. And to be fair, it's not hard to see why they would be so hostile to the idea. If people start believing that the true Emperor is elsewhere, waiting to be reborn, then what does that mean for the current order? If the High Lords of Terra rely on his divine authority to rule, then the idea that he is incomplete, or worse, that his return could overthrow them, is an existential threat. The Star Child isn't just a heretical concept, it's a direct challenge to the very foundation of the Imperium. But despite all the suppression, the myth persists. Psychers continue to have visions of a golden figure walking through the warp, unchained from the Golden Throne. Strange prophecies circulate, speaking of a new dawn for humanity, a final battle against chaos, and a rebirth that will change everything. Whether the Star Child is real or just another legend in a galaxy full of them, one thing is certain. The idea that the Emperor's story isn't over refuses to die. And if there's one thing history has shown, it's that in Warhammer 40k, myths have a way of becoming reality in the most unexpected ways. Roboute Guilliman's return is one of the biggest events in Warhammer 40k's recent history, and it's no surprise that people immediately started asking the big question: could he be the Emperor's true successor? The Imperium has been running on autopilot for over 10,000 years, with bureaucrats, warlords, and fanatics all claiming to rule in the Emperor's name. But now, for the first time since the Horus Heresy, there's an actual Primarch walking the halls of the Imperial Palace, issuing commands, shaping policy, and let's be honest, making a lot of people very nervous. Guilliman himself doesn't claim to be the Emperor's heir, and he certainly doesn't see himself as a god. In fact, one of the first things he did upon his return was question just how far the Imperium had fallen from his father's original vision. The massive, paranoid, superstitious theocracy he found was a far cry from the rational, enlightened civilization the Emperor had once envisioned. But despite his frustration, Guilliman has stepped into a leadership role because, frankly, no one else is capable of doing it. The High Lords of Terra are corrupt, the ecclesiarchy is bloated with dogma, and the Imperium itself is barely holding together. If anyone has the strength, intelligence, and sheer force of will to pull humanity back from the brink, it's him. But can Guilliman * replace * the Emperor? That's where things get complicated. No matter how skilled he is as a strategist, no matter how much political authority he wields, Guilliman is still just a man. He may be a Primarch, a genetically engineered demigod, but he's not an immortal, galaxy-spanning psychic entity fused into the very foundation of the Imperium. He can lead, he can inspire, but he can't sit on the golden throne and hold back the horrors of the warp. He can't sustain the Astronomicon or shield the Imperium from demonic incursions. The Emperor isn't just a ruler. He's a living force that keeps the Imperium from imploding under the sheer weight of its enemies. No matter how capable Guilliman is, he can't fill * that * void. That said, some believe that Guilliman's role isn't to replace the Emperor, but to prepare humanity for what comes next. His resurrection wasn't just some random event. It was made possible by the intervention of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Aldari, and the strange, half-understood powers of the god of the dead, Aeneid. That alone suggests that something bigger is happening behind the scenes. Guilliman himself has admitted that during his time in stasis, he experienced visions, glimpses of the Emperor's will, though he doesn't fully understand them. Some theorists argue that he's being positioned as a bridge, a transitional figure who will either usher in the Emperor's return or lead humanity into a new phase of its evolution. Of course, there are also those who fear that Guilliman's rule is too different, that his presence might actually destabilize the Imperium rather than save it. He openly clashes with the ecclesiarchy, rejects the idea of the Emperor as a god, and pushes for reforms that go against 10,000 years of imperial doctrine. Some factions, particularly the more fanatical branches of the Inquisition and the Ministorum, see him as a dangerous heretic, a necessary evil perhaps, but one they'll gladly eliminate if he ever oversteps too far. The idea that Guilliman might * replace * the Emperor is outright blasphemy in their eyes. Then there's the question of what Guilliman himself * wants *. Unlike his brothers, he was never obsessed with power. He was a builder, a statesman, a leader who valued order and progress over conquest and domination. He didn't ask for this responsibility. He took it on because no one else could. But does he * want * to rule forever? If the Emperor were to return in some form, would Guilliman step aside, or would there be conflict between father and son over what the Imperium should become? At the end of the day, Guilliman is a temporary solution to a much bigger problem. He can stabilize the Imperium, push back its enemies, and lay the groundwork for whatever comes next. But unless he undergoes some kind of transformation, either ascending to godhood himself or finding a way to restore the Emperor, he can never truly take his father's place. The Imperium was built around a being far greater than any Primarch, and until that void is filled, humanity's future remains uncertain. The question isn't whether Guilliman * can * replace the Emperor, it's whether the Emperor will allow him to. The Golden Throne is failing. That's not a rumor, not some obscure piece of lore buried in ancient data vaults. It's a terrifying fact that the Adeptus Mechanicus and the High Lords of Terra are desperately trying to manage. The mechanisms keeping the Emperor alive, or at least in his current state, are breaking down, and no one knows how to fix them. Or even worse, some suspect that the Mechanicus does know how to fix them, but is either too afraid or too dogmatic to act. The truth is, no one fully understands the Golden Throne anymore. It was built in a time before the Imperium, before the Age of Strife, when humanity's technological mastery was at its peak. The Emperor himself either designed it or repurposed it from something even older, possibly a relic from the Dark Age of technology or a lost creation of the Old Ones. But after 10,000 years of constant operation, after countless modifications and desperate repairs, the original purpose of the throne has been lost in layers of superstition, ritual, and secrecy. The Mechanicus treats the throne not as a machine to be repaired, but as a holy relic, a divine artifact that must be maintained through sacred rites and prayers to the machine god. Every cogitator, every circuit, every piece of arcane technology inside it is wrapped in layers of ritualistic dogma. Some tech priests believe that attempting to fix the throne in a traditional sense would be heresy, an insult to the Omnissiah and the divine will of the Emperor. They believe the throne is meant to function exactly as it does now, until the Emperor himself decides otherwise. But not everyone in the Mechanicus follows this line of thinking. There are whispers of radical magi who believe they could restore the throne, if they were given access to the right knowledge. Some claim that the lost STCs, the ancient standard template constructs from the Dark Age of technology, contain blueprints that could restore the throne's systems. Others point to the Necrons, whose mastery of life-preserving technology far surpasses anything the Imperium possesses. The most extreme theorists even suggest that the Emperor himself once knew how to maintain the throne, but never shared that knowledge, either because he planned for something greater or because he foresaw what the Imperium would become and knew they would misuse it. There's also a much darker possibility. What if the throne isn't meant to last forever? Some believe that the throne was never designed to sustain the Emperor indefinitely, that it was only meant to be a temporary measure while he healed or transitioned into something greater. If that's true, then the fact that it's breaking down isn't a failure. It's part of a process. A terrifying, unpredictable process that could mean the Emperor's long-awaited return, or his final death. And let's not ignore the fact that, whether intentionally or not, the Imperium needs the Emperor to remain in this state. The High Lords of Terra, the Ecclesiarchy, the Mechanicus, these institutions are all built around the idea that the Emperor endures, silent but ever-present, guiding humanity through his loyal servants. If he were to awaken, or die, or transform into something else, their entire power structure could collapse overnight. Some conspiracy theorists believe that the Mechanicus isn't just failing to repair the throne, they are deliberately letting it decay, ensuring that the Emperor remains exactly as he is, a symbol, a god who cannot act, a source of authority that they can wield in his name. So can the Golden Throne be fixed? Maybe. But the real question is, should it be? If the throne is truly breaking down, then whatever happens next is something the Imperium is completely unprepared for. If it's repaired, would it simply extend the Emperor's suffering? If it fails, does it mean his rebirth or his end? No one knows the answers, but one thing is certain. Time is running out, and when the throne finally breaks, the fate of the Imperium will be decided in that moment. Whether for good or for ruin, change is coming. If the Emperor is truly coming back, how would it happen? That's the big question, and depending on who you ask, the answers range from the miraculous to the outright terrifying. Some believe his return is inevitable, others think it's impossible, and then there are those who argue that it's already happening in ways we don't fully understand. The Imperium is a place of contradictions, an empire built on a god who once denied his own divinity, a civilization sustained by a ruler who no longer rules. If he does return, it won't just be a change. It will be the single most transformative event in the history of mankind. One of the most popular theories is that the Emperor will ascend fully into the warp and become a true god, no longer bound by his dying body on the Golden Throne. Many argue that this process is already underway, fueled by 10,000 years of faith. Unlike the Chaos Gods, whose power is shaped by emotions like rage, desire, or despair, the Emperor's strength comes from sheer, unwavering belief. Billions of humans pray to him daily, offering their faith as a source of power. Could that be enough to trigger his transformation? And if he does become a god, what happens next? Will he manifest in a new form? Will he create an avatar to lead humanity, much like the Chaos Gods send demon princes to act as their champions? Or will he simply reshape the galaxy from within the warp, influencing reality on a scale beyond mortal comprehension? Then there's the idea of the Emperor being reborn in a new body. The Adeptus Mechanicus has long sought ways to extend life, to cheat death, and to master the art of resurrection. Could they create a new vessel for him? Some believe the Sensei, the supposed immortal descendants of the Emperor, hold the key. If they truly exist, could they serve as a genetic template for his return? Or perhaps his rebirth will be something even stranger, something we can't yet predict. There are whispers of hidden vaults beneath Terra, ancient projects abandoned long ago, experiments meant to ensure that if the Emperor ever truly died, he could rise again. If any of those projects still exist, then someone somewhere might be working toward his return even now. Another, more esoteric possibility is that the Emperor is already influencing events through chosen individuals. Some claim that certain saints of the Imperium are fragments of his will, guiding humanity on his behalf. There are stories of warriors who become vessels of his power, burning with golden light, striking down demons with impossible strength. What if the Emperor is testing ways to return, pushing his presence into reality in small, controlled ways before making his final move? Some even speculate that Guilliman himself might be part of this process, an experiment, a tool, or perhaps even a stepping stone toward something greater. Of course, not all theories are hopeful. There are those who fear that if the Emperor tries to return, the consequences could be catastrophic. What if the process is incomplete? What if the entity that emerges is no longer the Emperor as he once was, but something new, something alien? If the warp has touched him deeply enough, could he return as a being beyond human understanding, one that might not even recognize mankind as something worth saving? Some believe that the Chaos Gods themselves would try to corrupt or twist his resurrection, turning him into something dark and terrible. After all, they have already proven they can manipulate Primarchs. Why not the Emperor himself? And then there's the most unsettling possibility of all, that he can't come back, that the Golden Throne isn't a cocoon but a tomb, and that all the faith, all the sacrifices, all the desperate prayers are in vain. If that's true, then the Imperium is living on borrowed time, clinging to the shadow of a god who will never rise again. In the end, no one knows for sure. The Emperor's return is a promise, a legend, a prophecy. But whether it will be salvation, damnation, or something entirely unexpected remains the great unanswered question of the Imperium. And when that moment finally comes, will humanity be ready for what it brings? The idea of the Emperor dying is one of the most terrifying scenarios imaginable for the Imperium. For over 10,000 years, his presence on the Golden Throne has been the glue holding humanity together, both literally and symbolically. His psychic might fuels the Astronomicon, allowing interstellar travel and communication. His existence is the foundation of imperial faith, the justification for its brutal, unyielding rule. Even if he is little more than a corpse sustained by arcane technology, the sheer belief in his continued presence keeps the Imperium from collapsing under its own weight. But what happens if that presence is suddenly gone? What if, one day, the Golden Throne finally fails, and the Emperor's mind is extinguished? The most immediate and obvious consequence would be the loss of the Astronomicon. Without the Emperor's psychic beacon, the Imperium would be thrown into total disarray. Warp travel, already dangerous and unreliable, would become almost impossible for most ships. Entire star systems would be cut off from one another, leaving countless human worlds stranded and vulnerable. The Imperium is vast, but it is only held together by the ability to traverse space. Without that, it fractures. The outer regions would fall first, devoured by Xenos, chaos, and rebellious warlords. Even the core worlds, the heart of imperial power, would eventually succumb to anarchy. And then there's the warp itself. Many believe that the Emperor's presence acts as a barrier, keeping the worst horrors of chaos at bay. If that barrier breaks, what happens next? Would Terra itself be swallowed by a demonic invasion? Would the ruinous powers, no longer opposed by their greatest enemy, launch an all-out war on reality? Some theorists believe that the warp storm known as the Eye of Terror could expand, consuming more and more of the galaxy until nothing remains but madness. Others suggest that chaos has only been kept in check by the Emperor's will, and with him gone, the entire Imperium could be dragged into the immaterium, transformed into a playground for demons and dark gods. But not everyone believes the Emperor's death would mean the end. There are radical factions, both within and outside the Imperium, who argue that his passing could actually be the catalyst for something greater. Some believe that if he finally dies, his soul will be free to reincarnate or ascend fully into godhood. Perhaps his death is the final step in his evolution, allowing him to return in a new form, more powerful than ever. If the theory of the Star Child is true, then his physical death could be the moment when his rebirth finally begins. Then there are those who suggest that the Imperium could, in theory, survive without him. After all, it has already lasted 10,000 years with only the memory of his leadership. Some argue that his worship has become a crutch, preventing humanity from advancing beyond the stagnant, oppressive system that now defines it. If the Emperor dies, maybe it forces the Imperium to finally evolve, to find a new way forward without relying on a single figure to hold everything together. But let's be real. Expecting a bureaucratic, dogmatic nightmare like the Imperium to suddenly develop independent thought and innovation overnight is a bit of a stretch. One of the most unsettling possibilities is that the Emperor's death wouldn't lead to total collapse, but instead to something even worse, a second Horus heresy. The Imperium is already filled with factions that barely tolerate each other. The High Lords of Terra, the Inquisition, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the various Space Marine chapters. Many of them have their own agendas, their own visions of what the Imperium should be. If the Emperor is gone, what's stopping them from turning on each other? Who gets to decide what happens next? The Imperium could tear itself apart in a civil war that makes the original heresy look like a minor skirmish. And then, of course, there's the possibility that the Imperium asterisk doesn't T asterisk collapse, but instead hardens into something even more terrifying. Imagine a future where the ecclesiarchy, in a desperate bid to maintain order, declares that the Emperor has ascended and demands even greater devotion from the populace. Maybe the Inquisition takes complete control, ruling with absolute authority in his absence. Maybe the Imperium doesn't fall apart, but becomes an even more brutal, repressive nightmare, clinging to the memory of its dead god with even greater fanaticism. So would the Emperor's death be the end of the Imperium? Maybe. Or maybe it would just be the beginning of something even worse. The only thing that's certain is that if the Golden Throne ever truly fails, the galaxy will never be the same again. If there's one thing Warhammer 40k fans love, it's theorizing about the Emperor's return. Some believe his resurrection is inevitable, a moment that will redefine the Imperium and reshape the galaxy. Others argue that his return is a fantasy, wishful thinking fueled by desperate hope. And then there are those who embrace the truly insane ideas, the ones that sound completely ridiculous until you remember that in the grim darkness of the far future, asterisk nothing asterisk is impossible. One of the more grounded theories is that the Emperor will return through sheer psychic will. Over 10,000 years, countless psychers have been sacrificed to sustain him, and their combined energy might be enough for him to eventually reawaken. Some believe he is already gathering power, waiting for the right moment to break free from the Golden Throne. Maybe it's just a matter of time before he rises, restored and reforged into something even greater than before. But if that were the case, wouldn't we have seen signs by now? Wouldn't the Imperium already be feeling the effects of his imminent return? Then there's the idea that his rebirth requires a catalyst, something or someone to trigger the process. This ties into theories about the Sensei, the supposed immortal descendants of the Emperor. Some believe that if these individuals were gathered and sacrificed, their combined essence could bring him back in a new form. Others speculate that Guilliman's return is part of a larger chain of events leading up to the Emperor's resurrection. Maybe Guilliman isn't meant to rule, but to prepare the Imperium for the moment his father finally awakens. And then we have the warp-based theories. If chaos gods are shaped by belief, then could the Emperor be evolving into something similar? Billions worship him as a god. What if that worship is transforming him into an actual warp entity, a being capable of manifesting in both the material and immaterial realms? Some fans argue that the Emperor is already an active force in the warp, waging an unseen war against chaos, and that his next incarnation will be as a divine warrior who can walk between worlds. If this is true, then the Imperium may not even recognize him when he returns. Of course, not all theories are optimistic. Some suggest that if the Emperor does return, it won't be as the savior everyone expects. 10,000 years of suffering and watching his Imperium twist into a brutal theocracy could have changed him. What if he comes back, but as something cold, alien, and wrathful? Some even believe that his first act upon returning would be to destroy the Imperium as it exists, purging the corruption and rebuilding it from the ground up, if he even sees humanity as worth saving anymore. And then we get to the truly wild theories. Some believe the Adeptus Mechanicus has a secret clone of the Emperor hidden away, a contingency plan in case the Golden Throne finally fails. Others think the Necrons, in their quest to purge the galaxy of chaos, might have a way to rebuild the Emperor using their ancient technology. And of course, there's always the possibility that the Emperor never actually needed the Golden Throne at all, that he's been pretending to be trapped, using his stasis as a test to see if humanity is worthy of his return. At the end of the day, the truth is impossible to know. The Imperium is built on faith, and faith fuels speculation. Maybe the Emperor will return in fire and glory, leading mankind into a new age. Maybe he will never return, and humanity will have to find its own way forward. Or maybe, just maybe, he's already out there, watching, waiting, and shaping the galaxy in ways no one can yet comprehend. The idea that the Emperor's very existence is intertwined with Astronomica is as thrilling as it is terrifying. Many fans have spent countless hours musing over the possibility that if his psychic connection, his shadow, as some might call it, were to disappear, the entire fabric of reality might unravel. Imagine the Emperor, the central pillar of the Imperium, severed from that all-encompassing psychic phenomenon, which has not only sustained the boundaries of his realm, but also infused him with near-mythical power. In this scenario, the Emperor would no longer be a solitary figurehead, but might instead merge once more with the cosmic energy that has long defined his rule. There are those who believe that if his connection to Astronomica were to be disrupted, whether by his death or an unforeseen restoration, reality itself would undergo a radical transformation. This perspective is fueled by the idea that the Emperor, acting as a living conduit, channels the collective will and psychic energy of his people. Without this lifeline, his capacity to hold the Imperium together could be severely compromised. Fans argue that the intricate dance between his personal power and the cosmic force of Astronomica is not just a metaphor for leadership, but a literal mechanism by which the universe is kept in balance. Some even speculate that if his shadow were to vanish, we might witness a chaotic reordering of the cosmos, where the boundaries between order and chaos blur in unprecedented ways. On the other hand, there exists a counter-theory steeped in optimism and cosmic determinism, the notion that the Emperor could eventually reintegrate with Astronomica, emerging not as a diminished leader, but as a transcendent entity who has evolved beyond mere mortality. According to this view, the dissolution of his link might only be temporary, a transformative phase during which his essence recalibrates, absorbing and reflecting the deeper, almost divine aspects of the psychic phenomenon. Supporters of this idea often refer to ancient myths and legends where gods and mortals share a similar duality, where death and rebirth are part and parcel of an eternal cycle. For them, the Emperor's eventual re-emergence would not be a loss, but a metamorphosis, a return as something greater, more enigmatic, and even more capable of guiding the Imperium through turbulent times. The debate intensifies when considering the nature of Astronomica itself. Is it merely a passive reservoir of psychic energy, or does it possess an active, almost sentient quality that could react to the Emperor's demise? Some fans lean toward the latter, imagining a scenario where Astronomica itself, unable to sustain the delicate balance without its chosen guardian, begins to shift. The very laws of physics and metaphysics could warp, as if the cosmic fabric were trying to heal or adapt to the sudden absence of a central organizing principle. In such a case, reality might morph into something unrecognizable, a wild, unpredictable landscape where traditional notions of order, duty, and destiny are upended. This uncertainty has led many within the community to question not only the fate of the Emperor, but also the essence of leadership and sacrifice. Could the dissolution of this link herald a period of renaissance for the Imperium, where new forms of power emerge from the ashes of the old? Or would it plunge the realm into an abyss of chaos, where every faction scrambles to harness the shifting energies for their own survival? These questions resonate deeply because they challenge the very core of what it means to be a leader in a universe where power is as much about belief and psychic connection as it is about brute force and strategy. Personally, I find the notion of the Emperor reuniting with Astronomica after a period of disintegration both heart-wrenching and exhilarating. It paints a picture of a cyclical universe where endings are but preludes to new beginnings, a universe that is forever in flux, yet governed by an underlying rhythm that fans have come to revere. The idea that the Emperor might return in a form that transcends our current understanding of life and power is a narrative that speaks to the enduring hope for redemption and transformation, even in the darkest of times. In the end, whether the Emperor becomes an integrated part of the cosmic phenomenon once again, or whether his connection is irrevocably severed, remains a tantalizing mystery. The potential consequences, ranging from a cosmic rebirth to a catastrophic collapse of reality, mirror the perpetual tension between order and chaos that defines his entire legacy. This duality is what makes the subject so compelling, inviting us to not only ponder the fate of a singular being, but to reflect on the very nature of power, belief, and existence itself. The possibility of the Emperor's return is not just a turning point for humanity. It has the potential to reshape the entire cosmic hierarchy, challenging the established order among the gods and other powerful entities. For many fans, this scenario is the ultimate cosmic reset, a moment when the balance of power is thrown into utter disarray, only to be reassembled into something altogether new and unpredictable. Imagine for a moment the Emperor, long exalted as the greatest symbol of human strength and resolve, re-emerging into a universe where gods and primordial forces, like chaos, have long enjoyed their dominion. His return would not simply be a political or military resurgence. It would be a metaphysical event, a seismic shift that ripples through the very fabric of existence. Many believe that the Emperor's resurrection might challenge these age-old deities, forcing them to reconsider their positions in the cosmic hierarchy. It is as if the universe has been holding its breath, waiting for the moment when a forgotten or perhaps newly reimagined god of humanity steps back onto the stage, armed with the conviction of billions and the psychic power of an entire species. Some theorists argue that the Emperor's comeback would be a rallying cry for order amidst chaos, a beacon that compels even the most malevolent forces to reassess their strategies. Chaos, in particular, is often depicted as a relentless, ever-adapting adversary, its essence bound up with the ebb and flow of the universe's energy. Yet, if the Emperor returns, many feel that this might ignite a clash of titanic proportions, chaos and its demonic lieutenants versus the reawakened indomitable spirit of humanity. The idea is both thrilling and horrifying, a celestial struggle where the old gods and emerging powers are forced to confront an enemy that embodies the very notion of humanity's defiant will to survive and thrive. This potential conflict stokes passionate debates among fans, with some arguing that it might herald a renaissance of order, while others fear it could lead to a catastrophic spiral into further chaos. In parallel, there are those who see the Emperor's return as an opportunity for a radical redefinition of what it means to be divine. Instead of merely contesting the supremacy of the existing gods, his resurgence could inspire a transformation across the entire pantheon. For many fans, this is an exhilarating prospect. They envision a universe where divinity is not static, where the old gods, be they embodiments of chaos, nature, or fate, are forced to evolve in response to a new kind of divine energy, one that is intimately tied to human aspiration and resilience. This perspective suggests that rather than sparking endless war, the Emperor's return might encourage a kind of cosmic metamorphosis, one in which even ancient deities are compelled to redefine themselves in the face of a power that transcends traditional boundaries. There is also the question of legitimacy and identity. The Emperor, in the eyes of his followers, is more than just a ruler. He is the living embodiment of human potential and the unwavering conviction of an entire species. His return could very well blur the lines between mortal and divine, compelling other gods to question their own origins and authority. Some fans speculate that this might lead to alliances between unexpected factions, as deities once locked in eternal rivalry might find common cause against a new paradigm of power. Others, however, fear that it could deepen the divisions, spurring an all-out celestial war that would forever alter the landscape of divine influence. I find this debate utterly captivating because it touches on fundamental questions about belief, identity, and destiny. The notion that a single entity, one who embodies the collective hopes and dreams of humanity, could upset the cosmic scales is both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. The Emperor's return is seen by many as a moment of reckoning, where ancient forces must either adapt or face obsolescence in a universe where human ingenuity and resilience take center stage. In this light, his resurrection is not merely a political event, but a profound statement on the evolving nature of divinity itself. Ultimately, whether the Emperor's return will usher in an era of renewed order or plunge the universe into chaos remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries of our time. The interplay between his human legacy and the cosmic forces that govern existence poses a challenge not only to the old gods, but also to our understanding of power and divinity. It is a scenario filled with potential, both for monumental conflict and for a breathtaking transformation that could redefine the cosmic order as we know it. For fans, this is a narrative rich with emotion, ripe with possibilities, and one that continues to fuel passionate debates about the true nature of power in a universe where nothing is ever truly as it seems. The potential return of the Emperor remains one of the most profound questions in the Warhammer 40k universe. Whether it's through a miraculous resurrection or an unforeseen twist of fate, the implications of his return would reshape the fabric of the Imperium. His vision of unity, strength, and humanity's dominance would undoubtedly be a force of both hope and fear for the galaxy. However, the cost of such a return is uncertain. Would humanity welcome their God King back, Or would they recognize that the Imperium has grown beyond his original ideals, both in strength and in spirit? The true answer lies beyond the grasp of even the most learned scholars of the Imperium, and perhaps it's for the best that the question remains unanswered. For now, the Emperor's legacy persists, and his influence shapes the destiny of the galaxy, even if his return is but a distant dream. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on the latest updates and insights into the Warhammer 40k universe.